Welcome back, everyone. This is Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am being joined by a legal practitioner, John Matthew, to focus on justice and politics in Nigeria. Mr. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Right. It's so good to see you again. The last time we had a conversation was 4 months ago during the Niger State Governorship Election Petitions Tribunal process. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how will you assess Nigeria's democratic journey since 1999?
Well, I think to the extent that we've been able to transit successfully from one civilian administration to another, I would say we've made some progress. But I think more could have been done. It is important for us to understand that this democracy that was fought for by the sweat and blood of Nigerians who desire that they play a role in governance. And from 1999 up till date, there has been back and forth in progress. Back and forth in the sense that where we think we have made gains, those gains get rolled back almost by successful electoral cycle. So yes, we've been able to transit from one civilian administration to another successfully for over 24 unbroken years now. But I think much more needs to be done if we are to really enjoy the dividends of democracy.
Right, so we'll come back to what needs to be done, but it's often said that the worst civilian regime is better than the best military regime. Do you agree?
I don't, and I have my reasons. The basis of that assertion is only limited to the fact that people get to choose their leaders, as opposed to a military regime where leaders are imposed. But in all honesty, if democracy is advancement of society, I think some military regimes are even better preferred in terms of infrastructural development. And the indices are there. If you look at the regime of Sani Abacha, even with the vilification that followed his regime, most of the infrastructure that we enjoy today are traceable to that regime. Ditto the Babangida regime. That is not to say that democracy, military rule is preferable, but I'm saying that if the meaning of advancement in society is providing the needed dividends, then of course, by comparative analysis, you will say that even some of the military regimes did much better than what we have seen so far.
So this clamor for military rule from some quarters, as a lawyer, why do you think some people are making this call?
The reasons are not far-fetched. The truth of the matter is what we call democracy, which is a situation where leaders are chosen through a fair and credible process, has been eroded steadily. The gains that were made in the electoral process are gradually being rolled back. Before now, before some of these reforms, the basis of questioning our electoral process had to do with the rigging in the field in the course of elections. Now, with some of the reforms, the rigging of electoral results have gradually shifted from the politicians in the field to INEC, which is supposed to be the umpire. And so, people don't get the government they elected. And because of that, it is difficult to hold the democratically elected people, democratically elected, quote and unquote, to account. Because where you see people vote for a particular leader, and at the end of the day, it's a different person who is ruling in his state, it is difficult to hold him to account. And so some of the dividends that ought to have been enjoyed, some of the things that people expected a democratic system should have engendered, is not being felt at all. And it is made more worse now by the rising spate of insecurity and the economic hardship that has been occasioned by some of the programs of these democratic governments.
Well, Mr. Matthew, there are those who have said, all right.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead.
When people feel this level of despondency because of the program of a supposedly democratic government, the insecurity in a democratic setting, people look back and see these things were not what we felt in military regimes that we fought for. These were not the things we fought for. And so, yes, the world over democracy is preferable, but the brand of democracy we're practicing here and the reality that we face possibly informs why some people are looking back with fond memories about what we used to obtain when we had military regimes.
Because I was going to say, with military regime, I mean, no freedom of speech, no respect for the rule of law, the rights, fundamental human rights is a no-no. And you still think we are at a disadvantaged position when we say civilian rule is better than military regime. Now, but with some West African countries taken over by the military, do you see this trend spreading on the continent?
I think military interventions are in response to the realities on the ground. And the realities are dictated by the downturn in the fortunes of people. When people feel that the basics, such as food, shelter, infrastructure, are not provided, are unavailable, yet in the same situation, you find our leaders living in a completely different world. I mean, it is only natural for people to find that this system ain't working. And so, when people begin to feel that way, that sense of despondency, you wake up in the morning, you do not know what to do. You don't have anything to feed your family. You are unable to meet your basic needs as a person. What is the value of the freedom of speech to you when you can't feed? What is the value of the freedom to associate to you when you cannot take your sick child to the hospital? So these are some of the things that our leaders have failed to address. You must be able to put food on your table first before you begin to think about the freedom to associate or the freedom to speak. In fact, there are jokes and banters now that the only place you get a free meal now is in the prison. Because there you are incarcerated, yes, you've lost your freedom to move, but you are at least fed. People are dying of hunger. This is the basis. This is the basis why people have reached a conclusion that the democracy ain't working the way they expect it to. And this hardship is happening right in the midst of plenty, because our elected leaders have not shown that they understand the difficulties that is happening with our people. when you see them live the kind of lives they live in the midst of hunger, when you see the kind of things that are done openly in the midst of this want, you begin to wonder, is it that we really do not have, or that our leaders do not care? This is the bane of our democratic experience so far. And I think unless there's an urgency demonstrated by government to address this, gradually, what we're seeing as a joke might end up being the basis upon which the democratic experience could be truncated. Nobody is desirous of having a military regime, but the circumstances that people find themselves is what encourages that belief. And so, unless government wakes up to this reality, instead of living a life of denial, unless we wake up to this reality, that people actually wake up and have nothing on their table to eat, people begin to lose hope. When you have reached that stage of hopelessness, there's absolutely nothing you won't wish for to change that fortune. So, it is important that our elected leaders listen. It is important that they take actions as quickly as possible to address this. It is important to hope and to continue to cling up to hope, but you have to be alive to even realize that hope.
All right. We'll come back to that. Let's quickly talk about your state, Nasarawa State. Would you say successive governments have lived up to the dreams of the founding fathers?
Thank you very much for this question. You see, Nasarawa State, when it was created, with a lot of pomp and pageantry, and the people hoped that we will now have a state where we call our own. But successive administration have dashed that hope, particularly of those of the indigenous people in Nasarawa State. I'll give you an example. When you are governed by people you didn't elect, it's the most, I would say, I'm almost short of words to describe that situation. Nasarawa State has been so unfortunate. It shares the largest boundary with the FCT. Instead of successive administrations taking advantage of the proximity to engender economic development of the state, comparable to other states that were created at the same time, Nasarawa State, particularly the capital, Lafia, is just a glorified local government headquarters. And no government appears to come to terms and reality with the need to develop that state. It's an agrarian state. It has a number of solid minerals too. But no concrete policies are done to develop that state. Almost as if the people who are in leadership position in that state do not believe that they owe the people a duty to develop the state. And that is why some of us are wont to think that I think there's almost a deliberate policy not to develop that state. It is unfortunate what we see in Nasarawa State. And one would have thought that with the increased revenue coming to the state now, I would have expected some concrete developments that would have placed that state in its rightful position. But there's nothing on the ground to show that Nasarawa State has taken advantage of its proximity to the FCT, to open up the corridors, to open up the industrial hub, to channel our resources in farming to produce enough food. Nothing is being done. Nothing.
But I mean, how do you charge the current administration into developing that state at the moment?
The present administration is, unfortunately, in my assessment, one of the very worst we've had so far in Niger State. My assessment. The governor came in with lots of promise, and we believed that somebody coming from a private sector background was going to accelerate the development of that state. But so far, there's been nothing, absolutely nothing, to even inspire hope that that was a possibility. I mean, look at the increased revenue we now have. No commensurate development on the ground to show, other than distribution of grains here and there, personally by the governor in the name of palliatives. Is it too much to ask that for an agrarian society like this, the governor should have thought about buying farm implements such as tractors to encourage farming? Is it too much for the governor to, undertake the revival of the many, many, many promising places, minerals in the state, take advantage of the minerals that are deposited in our state to participate in that sector and use the revenue derivable from that to develop the state? These things are not being done. Rather, Niger State, a small backward state like us, has the largest number of first-class traditional rulers. And the entire thing that is being done is to service these rulers and service people who come from the state to take our revenues away. That is what is happening. It's unfortunate, and I hope that the governor will listen to well-meaning advice on how to invest and promote that state. Even the investment that were done by past administrations have all been sold out. We had a natural investment company which owned properties, which was producing water, which had a an efficient transport system. All of this is gone. Houses have been sold out. Nobody is accounting for anything. So that is the system we have. They just come to Abuja, get the statutory monthly allocation, go there, share it, and then it's business as usual. No development is happening anywhere. None of the local government is doing anything. Activities take place at the local government headquarters only when it is month end to pay salaries based on what is dished out from the headquarters in Lafia. That's all. So we are a very, very sorry state. And I think this is largely because yes, we have a leader who is said to have been elected, but we know better. We know whom we elected.
All right, Mr. Matthew, let's take a break, and when we return, we will talk more. You're watching Politics Tonight, everyone. We'll take a break, and I will be right back. Please stay with us.